So the first thing I'd like to do is reminisce way back as far as you can remember um, to Madeline, your older sister, and what kind of your first memories of her were. What's the
Okay.
age difference between the two of you?
Uh, Roughly 2.5, 3 years. She was born in 46. I was born in 49. And I was, or She's the oldest of the four kids. Was born shortly after my parents moved to San Antonio. They got married in San Francisco right at the end of the war. Both were in the Navy, and they moved to a duplex in San Antonio and had Madeline. And one, really, I wasn't there, but it eventually became family legend. Their duplex neighbor was a woman named Gladys who lived with her mother. And Gladys was really a hot to trot woman. I mean, she actually probably was in love with my father. But anyway, Gladys took a liking to Madeline, and Madeline was her little princess for the next 50 years or however long Gladys lived. Some of my earliest memories are Madeline. Would always get me in trouble because she essentially was my playmate, and she liked to play dolls and dress up. And remembering that this was the 50s, and the kind of the prevailing attitudes, et cetera, it would freak my father out when he would come home and I'd be playing with dolls on the floor and showing I was dressing up the little dolls, et cetera, or playing dress up. I would the clothes we had to dress up in were my mother's hand-me-downs, et cetera. So that's some of the very earliest memories. uh, I can move on. One thing I'll mention is Madeline showed, Madeline has an intense side to her that some people may have noticed. This was probably a lifelong trait of hers. It came out several times, particularly when our parents would leave the house on Saturday to go shopping. Back in that era, Saturday was the shopping day. And so the parents would leave the house and assign Madeline and me to clean. And one time I decided it was not my turn to clean the bathrooms. And this Madeline took great offense at this, and she ran to the kitchen and got the butcher knife and was going to convince me to clean the bathrooms. And as she swung the knife at me, I held out my hand and she actually cut me. And of course, it cut me across the thumb, and it started bleeding everywhere. Of course, now Madeline freaks out because she really intended no harm. She was just trying to convince me it was my turn to clean the bathrooms. I
Oh my.
survived
What
I'm
an
sorry.
incredible story. That is hilarious.
Well, I survived, and to probably the next Saturday or Saturday later on, when once again, I don't know if this one was over the bathroom, but she got so mad she was trying to kick me, and she actually kicked the coffee table and broke it. Of course, once again, she freaked out because, oh my God, now what are we going to do? We broke the coffee table. So we were able to put it back together and actually kind of hide the fact from our parents for quite some time until they tried to move it. And then, of course, it fell apart again. Um, Madeline always had a desire to get things done, and and would fight hard to achieve her goals.
That is
The
hilarious. Yeah, I mean, fight to the death, obviously. That is incredible. But it is so interesting because she you know, Dick describes her as she has soft power. Like, she's got power, but with a soft heart. I mean, even then, was that the case, or did it take a while to get through that phase where she wanted to literally kill you?
No, I think Madeline always, yeah, probably with with 4 kids in our family, it's always interesting to see the different personalities. That all 4 of us are very different, and Madeline is, of course, I don't know if Dick's ever mentioned to you, but her often is probably a little bit as a zinger would call her Aubreyina. Our father's name was Aubrey, and she definitely took more after my father, who was also a very type A personality, who was, his motto was he was a child of the Depression and had a very hard upbringing. I mean, very, very, very hard. And unless you were achieving something, then you were wasting your time. I mean, the idea of golf to him was just totally ridiculous. I mean, why would you hit this ball and then go run after it and then just to hit it again? And at the end of it, what did you have to show for it? But doing something like rebuilding a Model A, now you actually achieve something. So Madeline is certainly a little more of that bent than and I'm so anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So but Madeline does have a great, as you said, a softer side, of compassion. I think also we saw this in having a special needs child. That you all back, if once again you think about the time period that Alexis was born, and I can't remember her exact date of birth, but it was somewhere in around 65, I think, 64, somewhere in there. And services just weren't readily available like they are today, or in fact, there's still a challenge for special needs kids to get the help they need, but you go back to the 60s and it was really a challenge. And Madeline and Dick had to really fight and hang in there to get the best for their child. And of course, that's what a parent does.
And I think that, it's interesting. You talk about the toughness and the fact that she was a lot like your dad. I'm wondering if the birth of Alexis changed her in a way, in terms of, she's always described as being incredibly patient, because the patience that it takes to repeat and redo and be focused and so forth, that dramatically changed Alexis's life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you just said it all, that with in my only experiences with a Down syndrome child, Alexis, yes, incredible amount of patience and self-control. You can't just go screaming at to get your point across. You have to very patiently and calmly try to communicate what you're needing to happen. And so I think what you said is exactly right.
And so what lessons have you learned from Madeline?
Well, one, it actually goes back to a story kind of on Madeline's fight to get what she wants. When we moved to our neighborhood where she attended high school, the bus stop was several blocks away from the house. And she decided that that was just too far. It would not work for a young girl who needed to have her hair just right and so forth. And so she went to the administration and told them that they needed to move the bus stop to in front of our driveway. And so, sure enough, the bus started stopping right at our house, and Mrs. Men, who was the driver, would honk the horn, and we would come out of the house. And so, Madeline, I guess I don't know if that's a good story for the lesson, but
No,
set a
that is
goal.
a fantastic. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to tell that story again, because in the middle of it, there was like a little sound hiccup. So if you wouldn't mind, that is a genius story. I love that. If you could tell it again, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. So one lesson that Madeline taught me can be illustrated by a story from her high school days. When we moved to this neighborhood, and we started riding the school bus, the bus stop was several blocks from the house, and Madeline decided that just wouldn't work. That a young high school girl who needed to have her hair just right and her, well, not really makeup, I guess, but what little makeup you could sneak by with back in that day, and so forth, and that the bus should stop right at the front sidewalk. And so Madeline went to the administration and talked to them. And lo and behold, a couple days later, the bus stopped at the front sidewalk right at our house. And Mrs. Men, who was the driver, would toot the horn, and there we would walk out of the house and get on the bus. So, probably a good sign that Madeline would set a goal or an objective, and then would do what needed to be done to achieve that goal.
So she sounds kind of fearless. I mean, is that the way she moved through her life?
Yeah, I'd say Madeline was yeah. Now I also would say that occasionally she would I remember she was having trouble with her math professor, who was doing some my memory is idiotic things in her mind, and so she tells my dad, we need to go in and talk to this guy. And my dad he geared up, and yep, they went in and talked to the guy and straightened him out. So
I bet they were a crazy team.
they were. They both had red hair. Our father was called Red when he was in the Navy serving on aircraft carriers. They called him Red. His hair darkened a little bit as he aged, but it was auburn back in his youth, and very curly. And so Madeline definitely had the red hair that he had. So they both, if you go by the stereotypes of redhead, I would say they prove it.
So a couple more questions. What did you think of her as a mother?
Yeah, it's very always, working hard to get the best, whether it be for her special needs child or her other child, Matthew. That she, like most parents, wanted them to have all the resources or support that they needed, both the support that she could give them, And being a military family, with Dick having to be deployed for at times for a long time, lengthy time. Sorry, I kind of botched that, but
No, no worries.
with Dick being deployed many times for weeks, months away, that Madeline had to step up and kind of serve two roles. Dick, of course, was always involved in the kids' lives, but just was more difficult being gone.
And as you saw her move on, as the kids, as Alexis passed, and Matt was getting older, and then she turned to graduating, going back to school and graduating, and then becoming the most popular banker in the area. And what do you think of that?
Well, it was great. Yeah, Madeline. I always would look at, because being in the university business my entire life and dealing with transfer students, I would often would refer to Madeline's case in my own work, and staff meetings would kind of bring up the needs of transfer students, and I really don't recall how many colleges Madeline went to. I think she's, obviously started, not obviously, but she started at UT Austin. In fact, I do remember moving her up her freshman year to live in what was it, Littlefield dorm, and going to Sears to buy her curtains and drapes. So she started right out of high school at UT, and then she and Dick got married. And that's the story in itself. If I'm kind of
oh yes, he told me about him being commissioned and graduating and getting married on the same day, and her making her own wedding dress.
from a the family perspective, my memory is that she showed up one day and told my mother and father that, and Dick did previously ask permission, as was proper in that era, and still maybe proper now, to ask our father permission to marry Madeline. And of course, my father would not seal any deal without a Lone Star in his hand. So he stuck a Lone Star in Dick's hand and said, "Well, let's drink to that." And but they thought the wedding would be maybe in a year or something. And then Madeline comes home one day and says, "Oh, we're going to get married in 2 weeks." And we, of course, want a formal military wedding, and no planning had been done or anything. So it was really a fun family project that it took. I'm sure it was for. Of course, I'm looking at it from, forget how old I was, maybe 16, maybe, or something like that. So I'm sure for the adults and the involved, it maybe was more intense, or there was some drama, but really took a lot of the drama out, because you didn't have a lot of time to mess with drama. You had to just get it done. And so my mother and aunt, who happened to be visiting with us, and Madeline, made her dress, cut it out, sewed it, a beautiful formal wedding dress. And I planned their reception. We got a military sword, a Navy sword, and the whole works. So when our own daughter just got engaged, and we're starting to plan her wedding, and we're talking about 9 months from now. And, just we, joke with her and say, "Well, we could do this in 2 weeks if we had to." And, so
that is great.
And And of course, that was a great lesson in party planning and that you can, with teamwork, just get things done. I might also mention, in just kind of the reflections or um, my wife we loved to visit Madeline when they lived in Charleston because Madeline worked for a place called Nice Stuff. And Nice Stuff would was kind of that discount store where the owners would come up to the New York fashion industry and pick take their extras or maybe last season's leftovers or whatever, and so and ship down there. So every time we would visit Madeline when she was working at Nice Stuff, we would take an empty suitcase, and my wife would return home with a whole suitcase of new clothes. So she particularly liked that.
Oh yeah, she's definitely good with the hookup
Yeah,
for everybody
that's
who becomes
uh,
your best friend. So if you could think, I know this is impossible, but if you could think of a word, several words, what words come to mind when you try to describe Madeline?
um, well, she's always uh, my wife is giving.
I can see that, and I can hear
Yeah,
her whispering.
yeah.
That's so, oh yeah, yeah, that's totally me. Absolutely.
Uh, yeah, I need a coach. Um, you know, Tenacious is certainly one of them. We kind of talked about that a little bit. That stylish. Uh, she has a big heart, and Madeline was interested in style going all the way back to, well, actually high school. In fact, one of those, just interesting how you just have these tidbits of memory, and why do you remember that so much? And I always remember my aunt gave her something, a beautiful white jacket for Christmas. And of course, there was some kind of unwritten rule back then. Maybe it's still about, you don't wear white after Labor Day. And I think that was it, wasn't it? And and they're having this great fashion debate. Of course, I'm at that time probably like 12 years old or something, 10 years old, and I was trying to figure out what the big deal was. But the kind of the segue is Madeline always had an interest in style, and then when she lived in San Diego, she did some modeling, worked for there was Montgomery Ward had an organization called Wendy Ward, and Wendy was the fashion part of Montgomery Ward. Of course, now we might laugh to think Montgomery Ward had fashion, but Madeline, she taught uh, uh, you know young women or poise and style and so forth. So Madeline's always had that bent to her, but about style and being tenacious, just having to. We've talked about how having a special needs child, probably was the thing that brought that out the most. That you just, dealing with all the doctors and the whole array of professionals, government people, and psychologists, etc. You just had to be very tenacious, and then just having a big heart because you also had to, that's what kept you going, and I think keeps her going, is to have a big heart, to love and have compassion, So those are kind of the three things that immediately come to my mind.
And finally, what are your wishes for her and the rest of her life on her 75th birthday?
Excuse me 1 second, since you can edit this. What are your?
Enjoy the money. No, seriously.
Well, uh,
Well, the interesting thing about that is that Matt looks at it as, they basically had to grow up incredibly fast, getting married so young, having a special needs child. They didn't have their 20s and 30s to figure themselves out. And, now they do not hold back on enjoying their time together.
yeah, that's yeah, exactly. My wife and I, we were married 20 years before we had our daughter. So we, were able to do a lot of things in our first 20 years of marriage and our daughter was a blessing. And I mean, it's made our life whole or complete, but at the same time, we didn't have to, have the needs to take care of a child. So we were able to do a lot of things during our first 20 years of marriage. That Madeline Dick, get married straight out of college, as Dick said, gets graduated, commissioned on the same day, and gets married, I think maybe the next day. I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty much bang, bang, bang. They immediately moved to Pensacola. Dick starts his Navy career, and then they have Alexis not too long after that, and so yes. So now, the great news is that they both have had very successful careers, or if you add them all up, several careers in there, or numerous careers, and then now would be to have many more healthy years to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Madeline recently, I think you may know, came up to New York with Neiman Marcus, and she called it her Super Bowl. That this was, just something of that magnitude, and so yes, I hope she has many more Super Bowl opportunities. She deserves them. She now has some, the financial means, and enjoy the heck out of it. I wish her enjoyment and great health, and for many more years.